Well, welcome, Ms. Julie Wagner, and thanks for accepting to participate in this initial event of a whole program dedicated to cities that the Ateneu and its Science and Technology Commission has decided to launch. So, as you know, now we are in contact with different cities today in Latin American countries. So I'm going to direct to them. Bienvenidos a todos, bienvenidos a las ciudades participantes en este evento, en esta nueva experiencia de análisis, debate y conclusiones iniciales sobre la ciudad innovadora y más concretamente sobre los distritos innovadores. La sesión se va a celebrar en inglés, pero si alguna de las intervenciones prefiero hacerlo en castellano, pues Julie Wagner entiende perfectamente el italiano y yo le voy a traducir en lo que no entienda. Por tanto, bienvenidos Chile a través de la ciudad de Providencia, en el área metropolitana de Santiago de Chile. Bienvenido el grupo de Perú en Arequipa. Bienvenido el grupo de Colombia en Barranquilla. Saludos. Y Costa Rica, San José de Costa Rica, la capital. Saludos a todos, bienvenidos y gracias por aceptar la invitación. También sabéis que os informo que estamos emitiendo la señal en streaming y tenemos constancia de que distintas universidades, tanto de Europa como de América, se están conectando y personas y grupos profesionales se están conectando a esta sesión conjunta. Los objetivos de la sesión, the objectives of the session, Julie, that's for you, as you know, is to think and to discuss about the city and the innovation districts. We feel on a new city that makes compatible the economic development with the social equilibrium. That for us is really very important. The structure of the session would be a part of my presentation. Then will be your time with your presentation of the innovation districts. Then a row zero and the different groups in Latin America will participate in a question or in a statement, whatever they like. And finally, you will have an additional time to refer to those different interventions from Barcelona and from the other city. Finally, we'll disconnect and we'll initiate a local discussion that we will share afterwards. We will share from every city. We will reflect this in a short document, and then we will share. All the cities will share those sort of local conclusions, and of course we will share it with you. Okay? So. Thank you very much indeed. I would like to, before I introduce you, I present your long curriculum, but I will simplify it. I would like to give some ideas to share with all our colleagues and friends in other cities and also in Barcelona. The first idea that is impregnating the whole program related with cities, the first one is that right now cities in the world are competing to generate, to attract and to fix talent from all over the world. This is a global competition for talent, so for creativity and for innovation. So cities must be ready for such competition. The second idea is that the talent is the base of creativity and innovation, so the base for economic development. The third idea is that cities attractive for talent are the ones that have special innovative environments that we call it innovation districts. Sometimes we call it innovation ecosystems. Anyway, are urban environments that facilitate the interconnection among people and the creativity and the development of innovation about people and groups. So it's very strategic for cities to be able to create such environments. The fourth idea is that right now there is a big difference between cities able to create such urban environments and the city that doesn't. And I remember a book from Enrico Moretti called The New Geography of Jobs that referred to that. And the speed of divergence from the cities it's increasing. So the distance between innovative cities and non-innovative cities is growing and growing and growing. Growing in what? In the capacity to create welfare, to create new jobs, new talented jobs. And finally, that during the last years, there have been a lot of research, a lot of publications around those special urban environments. And one of the main groups, and that's my opinion, one of the main groups in those research is the group led by Professor Bruce Katz, and by yourself. And that's one of the reasons that we decided to invite you to participate in that session. So thank you very much. And now I will make a short introduction to you. Many of us already know your documents and your video, but I will make a short introduction. Julie Wagner is an urban researcher and co-author of the paper, The Rise of Innovation District. We distribute this document, and I think everybody has it. So a new geography of innovation in America. For over 12 years, she was an on-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, an independent think tank based in Washington, D.C., where she designed and led numerous global research initiatives. She is the president of Urban Insight, a company aimed to help cities and regions strengthen their competitive advantage. Julie has written articles on the new geography of innovation for the Harvard Business Review, for Fortune magazine, for Quartz, and for The Guardian, among others. So she is one of the most important experts in the world. Living now in Europe, actually, don't feel uncomfortable for saying that, because this is true. I just say true. Living in Europe, now you are living in Switzerland, Julie continues to help advance the competitiveness of cities and regions globally, including Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Melbourne, Milan, Silicon Valley, Sheffield, Sydney, and Torino, among others. Finally, Wagner earned a master's in city planning from MIT and holds a bachelor in organizational communication from Northwestern University. So, Julie, thank you very much for being with us, and it's your time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm honored to be part of a global network of intellectually curious professionals thinking about how to strengthen their own competitive advantage uniquely. This is not a story where everyone is copying each other. This is it's a story where places are building their own unique story and leveraging their historic and talent assets to create a unique place that is essentially moving them up the value chain of competitiveness. Now, Miquel, you brought up this notion about cities increasingly being divergent. This was Enrico Moretti. And it says to me that the whole issue of how cities grow up and move into their new levels of competitiveness must always be tied with efforts to be socially inclusive. Now, there are certain sectors like tech, software sectors, where the speed of their intervention and inventions are accelerating and fueling the real estate market to such an extent that it's creating even a faster divergence, a faster separation of social strata, if you will. So this issue of divergence, it actually it changes also based on your economic clusters. And so Silicon Valley right now is a perfect example, and I was just there 2 months ago. It is a perfect example of a region that is dominated by tech and that is now challenged with this increasing divergence of economy between the have and the have-nots. And not enough has been done to figure out how to link the two. Now, the presentation that I'm going to give you, I don't talk about how to link the two. But I want to be very, very clear. That is so essential to this story. It's just more of an issue of wanting to make sure that everyone had the basic same set of information around the framework and around the trends that are fueling this. And then perhaps maybe through the discussions, we can talk around the social aspects of that. So I wanted to start by making sure that is very clear, because having just gone out there and witnessed this myself, conducted more research to be doing some work with Google, it became very clear and very evident of what you don't want to do. And what you don't want to do is to forget about how to link competitive advancement to social inclusion and rise of the general population. Okay, it's so important. I wanted to put that out there. So let me go ahead and start with my presentation. Do you see it?
Yes, some of it.
Do you see the presentation? I don't hear you. Okay. I'm going to assume the answer is yes, you do see it. Okay, so this is an image of Barcelona, right? In fact, this is an image this is a cover page that I use regardless of where I go. Next week, I will be in Denmark, and the following week, I will be in Sydney, Australia. And I will still show them this cover image because, frankly, it reminds me of where we started. Barcelona and 22 at Barcelona was the first study case that we looked at in trying to understand a new geography of innovation that's starting to cultivate in cities across a range of geographic regions. Now, the fact that I am on the plane probably 2 to 3 times a month tells you the extent to which there is a rise in local leaders across various global regions that are seeing the value of coming together in unique ways to figure out how do they leverage their unique strengths in cities to grow and to prosper in new ways. So this is the Barcelona story set our eyes on this new geography of innovation, which essentially has the collapse back of innovation into cities that has, in the last 50 years, been predominantly led by science parks and science corridors. Now, those are a predominant geography of innovation, In the United States, these geographies produce over 65% of the country's patents. But it doesn't tell, that statistic doesn't tell the story about the other 35. And I will get to that right now. But the story of science parks and science corridors is one of isolation, largely dependent on cars, largely separated and siloed, parking lots and large green spaces, tremendous setbacks between buildings that have only facilitated a separated and siloed way of innovating. Now, there are new trends over the last 10 years, 15 maybe even, that are growing, that collectively, if you start layering them on top of one another, you start to see this broader storm of events at play that are actually giving cities a unique way, a unique time to really leverage their own assets. And so this is a very exciting time for cities, of which 22 at Barcelona has just been one of those examples. Now, let me just walk through what some of those trends are. There are actually quite a few. I've boiled it down to 3. So the first one is the fact that innovation is an increasingly collaborative process. It is really almost no longer true that one organization or one firm possesses all of the knowledge now needed to compete in this highly competitive innovation economy. Part of that is driven that to innovate is just simply harder to do. It's just simply harder to do. And it's requiring a growing network of different actors to start to work together in ways that they haven't done before. Now, open innovation is one process that's being used that essentially invites different actors at different phases in the innovation process to come and contribute to what is now a porous or a joint or a more collaborative innovation process rather than a closed one. That is one example of how this is manifesting. In fact, there are several different examples or several different ways in which companies and institutions are innovating. Some are very informal and some are much more formal. But this networked story, this story of collaborating across different kinds of teams, is a fundamental story for innovation districts. Not only that, there is also another piece, another trend that sort of builds on top of that, which is not only are firms and institutions collaborating, but there is now a phenomenon of convergence where you have different sectors, could be engineering and it could be bioscience, that previously, even 5 years ago, would never have a reason to talk. They would never find a reason to compare the work that they're doing. And now this notion of convergence, where there's literally a collapsing that's happening, is creating a whole new level of disruptive innovation. Now, the autonomous vehicle is one of those examples. Now, if you can see on this slide, there are a series of different disciplines that were required to come together and look at the same problem with very different eyes, using different technologies, using different models, using different mathematical formulas to try to understand their piece of the story and how it all fits together. It's this plurality of view that has led to this disruptive innovation. And it's not just the autonomous vehicle. We're seeing this in cancer drugs and other medical breakthroughs related to diabetes, related to a whole series of neurological challenges. In fact, MIT issued a working paper in 2011 saying this is now the convergence economy. This is the most disruptive thing, the most disruptive event for our generation is that there is a convergence economy. Now, World Economic Forum also recognizes this convergence, and in their 2016 annual report, they opened talking about this convergence economy, calling it the fourth industrial revolution. That together, these very different sectors and disciplines are coming together, building off of each other to create new solutions. So diversity is leading to disruption. Now, I was just in, 3 weeks ago, I was just at MIT, and I had, for the first time, an opportunity to hear this back to me, because I have been making this argument around convergence for the last year and a half. And if I was standing up, you would actually see how excited I am about this notion, because it is so fundamental to moving these cities forward, is helping them not just innovate, but seek how to reach disruptive innovation. Now, MIT has a theory about it, which actually falls very much in line with what we're finding overall around innovation districts, which is that they are building a strategy, a place-based strategy, where they are putting together in very close proximity different sectors, different research groups, and they're pushing them together through various incentives as a means to innovate. So when this person gave this presentation 3 weeks ago, I begged for this slide. It took me a week and a half to get it, but I had to write every single day. I said, I will not stop writing until you send me that slide, because it takes what seems to be a theoretical notion around convergence and sets it into a physical framework. And not just anywhere, it's happening at MIT, and they are finding tremendous results. So I found this extremely interesting and relevant to this trend that I wanted to share with you. Now, Miguel, you talked about the drive for attracting talent. And you are exactly right. There is a global competition for talent. In the United States, there's a tremendous competition for talent. Across Europe, it is the same. I don't know to the extent that it's happening in South America, to the extent that there is this push-pull of trying to attract talent, but I would imagine that it is exactly the same, my guess. The fact is that talent, and not just any talent, but even the youngest strata of talent, those millennials, are being particularly focused on where they are living and working, and using the quality environment as one of those factors in deciding which jobs they're going to take. This is not a small point. So when, for instance, the work that I have just been doing with Google, it helped me understand what their talented workforce is needing and wanting. And they too, even in a suburban setting, are now arguing that they too want to have walkable, amenity-laden, service-oriented environments where they feel connected to others. And so cities offer all of these things that I'm talking about. They offer, by much more default than any of your suburban counterparts, the kind of density and walkability and accessibility to services and amenities than you can find in suburban areas. And this is a competitive advantage for you. Now, we actually pulled together a bunch of recent research to sort of see how this is really playing out physically on the ground. There are hundreds of papers around agglomeration theory, around how different firms or different sectors are agglomerating at the regional level, at the metropolitan level, and even to some extent at the city level. But more recent research is finding that there is another kind of agglomeration that's happening at the hyper-local scale. One is at the neighborhood sharing or neighborhood intensive scale. So that's the farthest part to the right, sort of the dark gray. This is roughly 1.6 kilometers, if I have my memory straight, because my slide is like this big. And this is the geography where knowledge-intensive, innovative, knowledge-intensive firms are agglomerating. They're happening at that distance. They need to be at least within that distance. Now, if you go all the way to the left, to the bright yellow, you'll see that R&D labs, because researchers are now able and are to decode what's happening by sector, they're finding that even R&D labs need to be even in closer proximity. And then the question that you could ask is, well, why is that? Why do R&D labs need to be even closer, within a 5-minute walk? I mean, why are they doing this? And this speaks to the trends that I just mentioned. The need to collaborate, the need to share knowledge, highly complex, very difficult knowledge that's hard to translate over the phone. It's much easier to do together in person, where you can do the exchange of information, where you can draw on talent pools very similar to yours. This is what is happening naturally. This is what's happening with the market. And it says that the market is valuing proximity in ways that we haven't seen before, and it is giving cities an advantage if they do the right things. And some of it is enabling these walkable centers, enabling these amenity-laden areas. That's part of the story. That is not all of it. But it has been an important piece of the story that Bruce Katz and I wrote about in the paper that we first published in 2014. To be frank, I did not anticipate the level of interest in this paper. We were making observations. This was not us making an argument. We were reflecting back at what we have been seeing in several places, across dozens of places in the United States, in Europe, in South America for sure. Those were the 3 actual global regions that helped us understand this. And this is our definition. This is where anchor institutions such as universities and companies are clustering and connecting. And they're clustering and connecting with a range of different actors, economic actors. It could be startups, small enterprises, medium enterprises, incubators, accelerators. The list could go on and on and on and on. But it's not just happening anywhere. It's happening in physically compact and walkable, technologically laden areas that include residential, home, and office. All of these sort of elements come together like a puzzle. They all seem to matter in the end, which I've always anticipated that I needed to go back and rewrite this definition. And the fact is that this definition still holds. Now, the important part of this definition, believe it or not, is the word connect. Now, it's very easy, right, to be thinking in industry verticals, to say in bioscience, we're going to be doing this. This is our product, and this is our output. Or even for a real estate developer, we want to build this library. What is really making innovation districts unique and create the kinds of disruptive innovation that we're talking about is going across. So thinking as best as you can through all the different levels and levers, how you can cut across horizontally between firms of all different sizes, including startups, making sure the leadership class is inclusive of that, having public spaces be not only across the district, but thinking through how those public spaces are going to be the connective tissue. This goes on and on and on. This notion of thinking across is so fundamental to this story. It's what moves these places from interesting places to continuously innovative places. So it's an important point that I just wanted to get across today. Now, when we wrote our paper, we offered up sort of 3 general typologies, and you see them here. I think it was helpful to be so categorized when we were writing this paper. But frankly, as we have gone to these very different places and different global regions, we've realized it's about shades of gray. There really are uniqueness across so many of these places that while these 3 typologies are interesting, there are actually much more. In fact, we started at one point to create a list, and then we stopped at around 15. Because what we realized is, what is the value of this exercise? Maybe what's more interesting is to start teasing out what's working or what's pushing them to prosper. So that's where we started to shift our attention. Now, as different as many of these innovation districts are, and they really are very different, they all have 3 common ingredients, and I do think it's important to share that here today, just so we all are on the same wavelength. And it's 3 general assets: economic assets, physical assets, and social networking assets. And I still continue to push myself on this model to see if it needs to get updated. And I'm finding the simplicity of it is very helpful for places. And it still rings true. Now, if you typed into Google innovation ecosystem and you hit image, you would find across the page about 100 different drawings. One's this way, one's this way, one's this way. And what you'll find is that they're all different arguments for how you create an innovation ecosystem. What I'm showing you is a place-based ecosystem. It is one that values place, density, quality place, walkability, connectivity, accessibility, these things, as much as these other 2 circles. So this isn't just about a science park story where you just put your actors together. This is about using the physical form to be the platform to connect these actors together. And it's about creating a social network where you're growing different actors and new relationships and being very intentional about it in this geography. And that when you combine these three, along with creative leadership, collaborative problem solving, a risk-taking environment, and a willing to figure out how to creatively finance much of this, you then start to get to this innovation ecosystem where innovation and activities are happening at an accelerated rate with less and less intervention. Now, every place that I go to see, I generally find that they're weak in at least one of these areas. You know, they have very strong physical characteristics, but they don't have the critical mass of economic actors that they are needing yet. Or they may have strong economic actors, but they're still pretty disconnected. No one's really thinking about that connection piece. So every place is growing. Every place is moving to become a better version of themselves. And I see my role, as much as being a researcher and an observer, but also as a supporter, to offer them some thoughts about what I'm seeing in other places, to give them some suggestions, some strategies to consider. And so that is the general story of this sort of broader paradigm. So let me just quickly go through some of these assets. So economic assets include research universities. Now, in a large number of innovation districts, research universities are actually the heart of the innovation district. They are the engine. They have the R&D funding. They have the PhD, young academic, tenured researchers and professors that are focused on advancing research at an accelerated rate. Now, not all places have research universities as their center, but it really is a core economic actor and engine to these stories. More than not, I would say. But there are other kinds of important actors as well, and you see them here. So there's different kinds of companies, which can be precision-oriented companies, more advanced industry companies who can have more of the creative fields, and even small batch manufacturing is finding its way back into not just cities, but finding a value in being in close proximity to some of these other actors. And part of it, again, is this notion of convergence, of valuing diversity of thought, of plurality of voice. This is what's happening. It's like creating this stew. Now, there are a whole series of other kinds of assets as well regarding the economic, but I actually want to move on to some of the physical in the essence of time. There are, as I mentioned before, the physical is fundamental to this. The physical is the connective tissue. So wherever I go, this is one of the, well, I'd say it's the third thing that I start to look at through my own sort of way of categorizing how these places are advancing. And you'll see that places from across Europe, South America, in Australia, in the United States are using very different ways of trying to create that connective tissue. Some of it's creating informal spaces. Some of it is intense programming in located spaces that are right near a key institution. And there's an intentionality with that because of the relationships that they're wanting to create with inside that building. It is research labs and in other kinds of innovation infrastructure. And on the bottom right, It is places like this district hall that are public spaces inviting anyone and any time to come in and use it as a place to work and to network. There is a tremendous amount of creativity that is that's happening right now in these innovation districts on how to use the physical form to inspire creativity, how to create connections, and how to move that particular area up the competitive value chain. Now, the last piece that I want to talk about has to do with social networking. And we turned to a sociologist. I actually did a lot of this research, and I probably spent almost a year looking at different ways of understanding how people organize, informally and formally. And there's sort of the business cases, there are the legal cases, there are the political science cases. And frankly, I found that the sociological understanding of this was the most on target to what I was seeing on the ground. And that is, if to put it crudely, that there are kinds of two different kinds of networking that's going on in innovation districts. Both are important. The one that's on the left is the tech regulars. This is happening in Eindhoven in the Netherlands. And this is where you're trying to create what's called strong ties, relationships between similar people with similar levels of education or discipline. And you're using them to solve problems that you can't solve on your own. This is a very important type of network to have. And it's also one that where people exchange information in a way that says, because the trust level is higher, it allows them to say things like, do you think this is a good idea? Do you think I'm crazy? That's the value of strong ties. Now, weak ties, which is on the other side, and this I actually used your story of 22 at your breakfasts, of which I don't know if you're still having these, but in the course of this sociological research, what's happening with these sort of weak ties is trying to pull like and unlike people together, right? So it's people from different backgrounds, different disciplines, different sectors that trying to create a new web and network. Now, it's this group that actually is more enabled to reach disruptive innovation. This goes back to what I was saying earlier around convergence. So diversity really matters. Diversity exception is a fundamental component and characteristic of innovation districts. Now, I just have one last little bit that I want to go through and then open it up. I just want to highlight for you some of the sort of three takeaways, the three lessons, if I had to say three, which I really should have said four, because inclusion actually is so fundamental to this. Just assume that that's there. But the first one that I want to talk about is that these innovation districts more and more are getting smarter about how to analyze their strengths. They're realizing that they need to learn more about what makes them work and what is limiting them. So, for example, having a critical mass of economic actors, a density of talented workers. What's the extent to which you have a startup community? What is the extent that you have a collection of innovation places, such as labs, that are simply needed to drive the innovation process? So more places are starting to be more empirically grounded in understanding their strengths. And we're pushing them. I've been pushing them, and others have well. Competitive advantage is another. What are you good at? Not what other cities are good at. What are you good at? And the more detailed that you can get within that district, the better. Do you have specific niches? Do you have specializations? Are there specific areas that are growing faster than others? The more these places are starting to understand where they have standouts, the better they can figure out where do we put some of our energy, where it makes us unique to build on. Quality place. Okay, a lot of the places, I'd say in the United States in particular, have some challenges on the physical. I go to a number of these innovation districts and I see that the physical still needs work because they are often creating just green spaces and not recognizing that there's more that needs to be done. They're either not in the right place or they're not being somehow meshed with programming, such as events and networking opportunities. They don't have the right kind of elements that are creating that kind of connective tissue. This is just one example. Now, I unfortunately cannot read my own slide because it's too small for me to read this, but you're gonna have to read this yourself to get to the specific words, but this is a very big point, and which is you or innovation districts writ large need to be understanding the value add of that geography. That they need to say, there are firms and talent and companies that could locate anywhere in our city. Why would they locate here? Why? Why would they select this area over others? And so that's why places are becoming very creative about creating a new value add, whether it's through new innovation spaces or programming or using creative leadership to say, we're gonna take risks with the startup community that locates here. And we're gonna create this fund. These are the kinds of things that places are doing creatively. And then my last slide, governance. Now, there are actually some exceptional governance models out there around innovation districts. I would say the biggest takeaway here is the importance of a governance structure early, because this is a complicated, multi-dimensional undertaking, and it requires some level of coordinated thinking. Now, there can be a mayor-led approach, but generally what we're finding more and more is that it's not a mayoral-led approach, that it has to do with a network of different economic actors, firms, universities that are coming together and meeting as a committee and figuring out their own rules. So in the end, this entire paradigm is about local values, local strengths, defining how to compete. And this is why everywhere I go, I see a very different story, a fascinating story of how these places are trying to become better versions of themselves and how to help firms, entrepreneurs, and others flourish in conditions that often can be hostile. So this is how I'm going to conclude. I want to thank you again for the opportunity to just offer you some of my insights. The learning continues regularly for me. Everywhere I go, I learn at least 10 new insights. So I hope that was helpful for the 4 audiences actually today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So now we will start with our row 0, la fila 0, i us demano intervencions curtes. And so finally, after that, and after the interventions of the different cities in Latin America, we will ask you for some sort of conclusions or summarizing some ideas. Okay? So let's, if you try in English or in Spanish, if you prefer. Okay? Endavant. I'm going to do this. Àlex Mañas is the deputy mayor of a city in North Barcelona called Badalona that is promoting an innovation district in an industrial area. Okay? Endavant.
Ok, gracias. Julie, disculpa porque mi intervención será en castellano y Miquel te traducirá porque mi inglés es profundamente innovador también. Entonces, nos has indicado en tu exposición algunos de los elementos que ayudan a que un distrito innovador genere sinergias en el entorno y genere valor añadido. Y mi pregunta, y en concreto también pues, basado en el trabajo que estamos haciendo, también asesorados por Miquel en mi ciudad, en Badalona, al norte de Barcelona, es cómo añadimos un nuevo elemento que es cómo la transformación de un viejo polígono industrial en un distrito innovador genera también una política de cohesión social en el entorno, genera también oportunidades no solo de nuevos puestos de trabajo, sino de ascenso social para los residentes en el territorio, ya que en muchos casos en ciudades de Europa estos entornos que hoy se está pensando en transformar están rodeados de barrios periféricos donde durante muchos años la política social no ha logrado generar lo que en otros lugares del mundo con transformación urbanística de distritos y no muy lejos de Barcelona tampoco sí que se ha conseguido. Gracias.
So I think you understood. No? How to...
I understood.
I use a very short word. How in a promotion of an innovation district we can incorporate a social transformation program related with some urban areas degraded economically, socially, and so how we can incorporate this as a new issue.
Yeah.
Okay. So now Oriol Estela is the general manager of the Metropolitan Strategic Plan of Barcelona Metropolitan Area. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation, that it's so inspiring, even though for those who have read already your papers. And my question, or my 3 short questions are these ones. The first one is there room for several innovation districts in a metropolitan area? If so, do they have to be specialized? And if so, in which way? Because specialization maybe damages the diversity of the environment of the ecosystem of the innovation district. The second one is about the side effects of the development of innovation districts, especially in terms of gentrification. So we have economic activity left cities because of pollution. Now is coming back to the cities, and there is no pollution, but there are effects on the rents and the public spaces that are taking people away from the city. So how to deal with this? And the third one is more an opinion about, because it's curiosity from it's something that is fascinating me these last months, that is all the process of the Amazon second headquarters in the United States and the competition among cities, and how this relates with the model of innovation districts. What kind of effects will this have for the city that finally will win the contest? Thank you.
Okay, next time for Jordi Julià. Jordi Julià is a civil engineer, an expert on mobility and transport infrastructures, mostly in Barcelona metropolitan area. Jordi. És que ja en teniu un vosaltres, eh?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. But to be a little bit controversial, I would like to see your from another point of view. Traditionally, the people with the higher incomes want to live, have been living in the best places, what were considered the best places. This traditionally was the center of the towns, and then with the sprawl of the cities became the suburbs. But now it becomes again considered to be the better places, the centers. So the question is, maybe these places where the most innovative places is where these most the higher income people want to live. So and of course it's again this what is now considered the better places, and this is very much similar to what the tourists want to visit. So I will visit London, I want to visit the Locklands area, and where I would like to live and also to work, but also to visit. If I visit Barcelona as a tourist, I would like to visit the seashore and the old town, but I would like also to work there. And if I was the owner of Zara or Amazon or Apple, I will buy these lots. We have Amazon shop here or Apple very near here, where even they repair the iPhones in the very center of the town because they can afford for it. They can even afford to have the repairing of iPhones in the very center because they eat a lot of money. So this is the point of view. So we can look at it from this point of view because.
Okay, Jordi, thank you. And now Ricard Faura is an anthropologist and is the president of the commission and an expert on some social phenomena in urban areas like co-working networks and spaces like that. Okay.
Hola, Julie, gracias por tu exposición. Algunas de las preguntas que tenía ya han ido apareciendo en mis anteriores compañeros, pero me gustaría hacer dos preguntas muy directas, ¿no? Aquí en Cataluña estamos apostando mucho por lo que es la innovación social, en concreto también nosotros de la innovación social digital. ¿Qué ejemplos nos podrías poner donde el impacto de la innovación social también participe en los proyectos de ciudad o de distrito que nos has comentado, ¿no? Y luego, a nivel de la necesidad de tener un perfil, unos profesionales específicos que ayuden a que todo esto que nos has comentado suceda de una manera más fácil y más llevadera, ¿no? Porque también es uno de los retos que tenemos en estos momentos de formar profesionales que sean los agentes que faciliten estas interacciones que tan claramente nos has expuesto que son necesarias, ¿no?
You understood? I think so.
No. You don't need to ask.
Yes, the first one is about social innovation, if you know some cases where this factor has been one important factor, because in Barcelona we take care and is a priority for us too. Is one of the main trends in Barcelona. And then the second one, yes, the training of people, how to facilitate this process of interaction through training and education process, I would say. No?
Wait, can I ask is that for children or for any of all ages?
For professionals. For professionals. And Artur, intervens, Artur? Yeah, Artur is a full professor of. He's anthropologist too, you know? And we have majority of anthropologists today here. And Artur is a full professor of the Universitat Politécnica de Catalunya, Polytechnical University, and he's leading social processes of innovation in different cities in the metropolitan area. Okay, Artur?
Yes, my question is about the region and the city. question is, do you understand me?
Yeah.
Okay, the relation between the cities and the region. Okay, we're in Catalonia, of course, in Barcelona. But now in Catalonia, we are developing this regional innovation strategy. And one of the interesting things is the 4-helix model of innovation. No? Beyond the three helix, you have the citizen engaged on that. And because we are in Europe, because we suffer 2 world wars, we invented the universal systems. As you know, we have in Europe health universal system, education universal system. And we are wondering the possibility about innovation as a universal system, universal innovation systems. This is quite important for us because we're suffering not a Trump or a Brexit effect, but something a little bit similar. That means that we have the experience of developing a very successful innovation district in Barcelona, but there are areas in the city of Barcelona that are not enjoying this kind of innovation districts. Or you can enjoy Barcelona as an innovation city, but you have other areas in Catalonia that are not enjoying that. And that forced us, as Europeans, to develop strategies to include everyone in the innovation system. And this is why we are working with regional government in the city of Barcelona. Do you know the similar experiences maybe in other cities in Europe or in America that wondering about this, how to avoid the Trump effect or the Brexit effect, that you can have one part of the system, the city or the country very innovative, but how about the rest? And the vote is similar in the most advanced district and the not advanced district. And that creates some really problems in democratic societies that maybe we should think about that. Not only the innovation part of the community, but also how to engage the whole community in this process. And this is our experience after 22 Arroba, a smart city, Barcelona was the smart city Congress, blah, blah. But then there is this danger, and how to solve that. This is one of the main concerns. If you can help us, we would like to thank you.
Okay, thanks, Artur. Not easy question, Julie. I'm not sure we are going to have time for answering everything. Anyway, now it's time of our cities in Latin America. So is your time. We can go in the same order I mentioned you. First of all would be Providencia in Chile. Recordar que es un portavoz representando al grupo que pueda hacer una intervención sobre algún tema que le preocupe relacionado con Innovation Districts. ¿Ok? ¿Chile?
Ok, Chile. Adelante.
Empezamos por otro. Okay? It's your time.
Yes, ready.
Okay.
Miquel.
Es el tiempo de Providencia en Santiago de Chile.
Sí. Hola, Miquel, de Providencia. Mi consulta es, en Providencia no tenemos un espacio físico donde agrupar estas empresas de innovadoras. ¿Te dificulta mucho si la intervención, si la infraestructura, se disemina por toda una gran área geográfica? ¿Me explico?
Ok, yo creo que es claro. Providencia is one city inside metropolitan area in Santiago de Chile that is, I would say, crowded. That is there are not many free spaces. So the questions would be, in such a case, how they could promote, but not concentrating critical mass in one space, but disseminating in different parts in the city of Providencia in that case. Es eso lo que preguntasteis, ¿no? Esa es la primera pregunta. Pasamos a Perú, a los amigos de Arequipa. una ciudad universitaria, muy creativa. ¿Qué pensáis en Arequipa? Adelante.
Aló, hola, hola, ¿me escuchan? Hola, hola, ¿me escuchan? Sí, hola Miquel, ¿cómo te va? Sí, bueno, en realidad para nosotros es una primera experiencia y en realidad estamos más aprendiendo que, digamos, de repente tener alguna opinión concreta al respecto. Y nos parece más importante escucharlos antes que emitir alguna opinión. Pero en todo caso yo aprovecho para darles un fraternal saludo a todos los que están presentes.
Muchas gracias, Mauricio. Saludos a todos también. Nosotros también aprendemos, todos aprendemos. You understood, Julie, now they are starting this process, so they prefer to listen and to learn from the different experience, as we all do, actually. Okay? So, the next one is Colombia, Barranquilla, en el norte de Colombia. Adelante.
Hola, ¿me escuchan? Aquí.
Adelante.
Bien, o más o menos. Sí.
Sí, adelante.
Ok. Bueno, nosotros yo soy Juan Camilo Cepeda de la Gobernación del Atlántico, en Barranquilla, Colombia. Y pues nosotros ya venimos trabajando un tema de alineación del ecosistema de innovación. Estamos trabajando con universidades, con gremios, con empresas y nosotros desde el sector público. Sí, exacto, gobernación con alcaldía de Barranquilla. Entonces nosotros lo que estamos, gracias a este debate pues, que se está generando acá, estamos comenzando a mirar temas de potencial transformación urbana en Barranquilla. Nosotros hemos considerado 3 zonas. Voy a poner aquí en la cámara como un mapa donde podemos ver cómo, es un poco rudimentario, pero bueno, ahí. Vemos que Barranquilla está muy cercana al río. Barranquilla es una ciudad portuaria, entonces tenemos 3 zonas interesantes. Lo que vemos de color rojo es una zona que está en las afueras de la ciudad, pero donde principalmente se encuentran las universidades de las más importantes de Barranquilla. La zona verde, de la estrella verde, es una zona donde se va a comenzar un desarrollo a largo plazo cercano al río y que tiene como ancla un centro de convenciones. Y la zona amarilla es un barrio pues en el centro de Barranquilla, que en este momento tiene la cercanía de algunas instituciones como la Cámara de Comercio, la Gobernación, y unos museos nuevos que se están construyendo, pero no tiene, digamos, una empresa o un ancla importante. Entonces, Julie, have you gotten most of the information, or do you want me to or do you want me to continue in English? It's basically 3 areas. One of them is located outside the city, which has mainly most of the most important universities. The other area is near the river, has a long-term development. And the other one is downtown, which has like a lot of old bodegas, warehouses, and has also nearby some institutions like the state government and the Chamber of Commerce, and one museum that is currently operating, and a future one that is going to open in the future. So we are opening this debate right now in Barranquilla. I know you talked about an anchor. We have some pros and some cons in each of the areas. So I don't know if maybe you can give us a little more insight on this. Again, this is the map.
Camilo, creo que está claro, ¿eh? Okay, Julie, you understood because he was in English. So. And finally, Costa Rica, San José.
Buenas. ¿Me escuchan? Sí.
Sí, adelante.
Desde Costa Rica. Ok, gracias por darnos esta oportunidad. José Andrés Solano les va a hacer las preguntas de fondo.
Hi, Julie. First, thank you very much for your presentation. And I have a question for you. Innovation is not just about buildings, about put together universities, companies. I think innovation is about culture. And here in Costa Rica, and I think in all Latin America, we have a problem with culture. We have a risk aversion problem. So my question is, for us, maybe one recommendation, how to create an innovation culture or improve our culture, not just put together all this in order to maybe for us create a startup city, for example. So that's my question for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Julie, it's not easy. You receive 9 interventions, many questions, many statements, so feel free to summarize or to give a general idea. Okay.
Okay. Can I let me ask a question. How much time do we have here? I mean, are you needing me to get off in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? I mean,
feel free, Julie.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll try. I probably won't get to all of them, but I'll do the best that I can. I think this issue, I'm going to do it out of order here, just because some of them are really on the top of my mind. This issue about a universal system is a fascinating concept. I have not seen this played out anyway and anywhere with this level of intentionality that I think you're talking about. If I'm understanding it correctly, I mean, I think you're looking at sort of 2 levels of thought here. There needs to be government policy probably at a couple of different levels. Maybe it's national, maybe it starts at the regional level and then goes down to the city level. That you need that sort of level to ensure for this sort of universal system. I have not come across any place that's thinking about it this way. No one. I mean, I'd say Israel is probably thinking of, is that the government, the national government there is sort of trying to take a more hands-on approach because they're wanting to have greater assessment of where these geographies of innovation are really starting to percolate and how they can play a role in fostering that. But that's as far as it's looking more around the market. In Australia, they're monitoring the various kinds of innovation districts, and they've only put out soft policies of encouragement, but nothing around this universal notion. And so what I'm actually hoping, and Miguel, maybe you can hand off my email address, is I'm actually hoping if you've written something about this argument or this proposition, that you could send it my way, because it would enable me to ask other questions. But I can tell you right now, this is not a notion that I've been hearing anywhere. But I think it's a very interesting one. So this sort of part of this speaks to a number of comments or questions that several have made. And some of it is around, wanting to have geographic equity, or in some cases, maybe we have many. So here's the general thrust. The innovation district strategy that's emerging, and this is coming bottoms up, this is not a top-down, is that it is a very hyper-local strategy. It's happening within generally a 10 to 15 minute walking radius. It's happening because in some cases you can have a mayor that's saying, let's start here and then expand. So you can have city government. But in a lot of cases, it's happening by the leaders in specific institutions, in corporations, and other sort of more economic actors that are coming together saying, to compete, we need to act differently. Some places have done that because they have had catastrophic recessions where they have lost huge industry and they've realized that they needed to work together in a different way. Others, such as, so that could be the Eindhoven model in St. Louis, their story is that they were growing entrepreneurs and strong talent, but then they'd all leave. They'd either go to the East Coast or the West Coast, and they realized that their local leadership class, not the mayor, when I say local, I mean even one level down, they need to come together as a unit and start to think through how to create a place, a very specific geography that is going to entice people to stay, their talent to stay, and entice other talent to come. Now, the reason why they didn't take a citywide approach is because it's so much harder to achieve. The other reason why they took a very specific approach is because there's a clustering of key actors in close proximity and say, let's create something unique here. And then if there's success, expand. Now in the St. Louis story, and this speaks to another question around how many can you have, the St. Louis story, they've started with one, but they're not done yet. And they don't have a lot of resources, government resources, institutional resources, but yet there is pressure to have it start happening in other areas. Several of us, of us researchers, question whether that's the right strategy. That perhaps the right strategy there is to get much stronger and then spread with success, rather than to immediately try to equalize. Now, we can have a debate on that, right? This gets to social equity, this gets to inclusion, and I get that. But there is also an argument about creating a critical mass of activity that then creates more activity, that then attracts the talent, that then creates the kind of jobs that you need, that then you can say, okay, we need from there creating, a whole series of other strategies that would allow us to spread. We could go back and forth on that. And I'm not necessarily sold that it has to be, you have to get this perfect and then move on. But we're starting to see that some places are trying to go too quickly to equalize, and that there's still more work that needs to be done to strengthen those assets there. So I think places are starting to experiment on how quickly they can expand. Now, I think someone had said, there is this, how many can you have? And I think that really speaks to the economic starting point of your city, the economic condition of your city, your strengths of your city. There are some places that are focusing on 4 innovation districts that I know of. And I think that they can handle it. This gets to that issue of how many can a region really handle and do well. We don't have the answer to that yet. It's still new. It's still a new phenomenon. But what I am finding is that, let's say you have a city of 1 million people or less, you shouldn't probably not be looking at having more than 1 innovation district. Once you get to around 3 million, we are starting to see this is when you start adding more. I mean, there's no magic number, but this is what's just sort of seems to be happening more organically. Now, on that question around how many can you have and what about the specializations, all of these districts that we've been looking at, they do have specializations, and those should be elevated, right? You know, so in Oklahoma City, they have a very strong specialization in healthcare and life sciences. In Pittsburgh, it's around robotics and automotive vehicle, and then also some degree of health. In Boston, they actually have fewer specializations, but they are trying to really push this notion of convergence. From what I can see, that it is the stronger ones have a clear set of specializations and then encourage diversity to allow convergence between all these different kinds of actors. So you want both the vertical or integration, you know, the vertical model approach of really strengthening some of your clusters, but at the same time in creating that kind of convergence. That's what I'm finding more often than not. The issue of gentrification is a really important one, and it worries me tremendously, because there is a relationship between successful innovation districts leading to gentrification. There is this relationship, and I think there's people within Brookings where I work where there may be some disagreement on that. And I haven't, so this is my opinion, and I think that there is a relationship, and it's an argument for why innovation districts need to be building in the inclusion and social equity piece from the beginning. So some places that may mean that the notion of housing basically needs to be government affordable housing integrated from the very beginning. Other cases, it's that plus the schools, that there needs to be a series of STEM or non-STEM schools that are protected and enhanced. That workforce development programs are deeply embedded and incorporated from the beginning. I argue that all these things need to happen. But the issue of gentrification, which has to do with the heating of a market, is one that I know when I talk to some master developers, that they are viewed often as the bad developer. And yet what they're trying to figure out, and they talk to me confidentially, is how can I help protect a greater number of people from rising property values? How do I build in affordability for housing, for startups, and even for scale-ups, ones that are beyond the startups? How do I create that in a way that I can finance? And then if I can't finance that, how do we as a collective finance that? Because it can't just be on my shoulders. So these are the conversations. And it's pushing this issue of gentrification, for example, is pushing issues around finance. It's talking about what leadership needs to do. It's pushing all of these things. And all of these are many of the same questions that are being asked in a lot of different places. So this is why there needs to be some real leadership at the local level, because frankly, I'm finding that even with similarities, these places are needing to go at it in different ways, given the economic conditions, given the culture, given the economy, given the value of land, that they need to have very unique strategies. So I would argue that every innovation district needs to be thinking about social equity, needs to be thinking about gentrification, and what happens when you start to have a heated real estate market. So that speaks to social integration, of which I want to argue my own point, which is in some of the places that I have visited that I think have done a relatively good job on trying to get social integration. When I quietly talk to their leadership class and ask them, do they think that they're doing enough? Their answer is no. And it's sort of one of the things that worries them, because what they want, right, is to grow their economy. And with that, grow jobs. And with that, grow opportunity. And with that, grow access for new startups. I mean, there is a logic here which is intending to be broader than just multinational corporations, of which is of value and extreme importance. But how to build that in, and how to do that in the way that seems sufficient, I frankly am still finding that almost all of these innovation districts need to do more. They need to do more. And so in some cases where it's market-led or a market-driven district, this is when you need help from the government, or you need help from the philanthropic sector to try to figure out how to create those kinds of. So I think bottom line is, and this is why I raised it up front, every single innovation district must be thinking around the issues of social integration, even if it's in a currently socially depressed area, thinking about what does success look like and what happens, who loses. These are the questions that these places must be asking, and many of them are. Now, I would say that I don't know what's happening with your Barcelona Activa, and I don't know how you view that, frankly. But I wonder back to you if you think that that's a model of starting to catalyze social integration, or if it's just not. Because this is the kind of information that's helpful for me, because at least years ago, I could see how this was intending to both build startups, help them grow, get them to locate in Barcelona in 22 At, and give them the support they need. I just don't know where it is now, but at one point in time, it had been looked at as a potential model for catalyzing this issue of social integration. I do want to touch on the Amazon piece real quickly. I think if I was a city, I would not want Amazon. This speaks to what I had said earlier around the comment, Miquel, you made around increasing division economically. Enrico Moretti made this point. The tech sector, software and specific companies are fueling real estate prices to go up at an accelerated rate. And I don't know if this is being videotaped, but I hope you don't include the Amazon piece in there. But I would be worried about what that could mean for the implications for the people that live and work there. I think that the city that is selected is going to require a significant amount of additional money that's going in from Amazon to offset the kinds of impacts that it's going to have to a range of communities that may no longer be able to afford over time that particular area. This is the issue. This is what's starting to happen in Silicon Valley, right? Silicon Valley is finding this wider division in part because of tech, which is, it's more intense, okay? It's a more intense phenomenon. Enrico Moretti speaks to this. Richard Florida speaks to this. Several people at Brookings Metro speaks to this, that the tech sector fuels this division at a faster rate. So that's why you have to be thinking through, how is that then accommodated or built in or factored in or reconciled upfront. I don't know. I will be interested to see what Amazon does in addition to just selecting a city. I really hope that there's a lot more that comes with it than just saying that. And I know that many cities have been thinking about wanting to offer and have offered subsidies to Amazon. I would argue that it needs to be the other way around. But the Amazon story is not the Innovation District story. I want to be very clear about that. The Innovation District story is about local building up of an economy, of an innovative economy drawing on unique skills and assets. There, grounded in place. Factoring in how to address issues of social inclusion and gentrification. Factoring in how to extend when they reach a higher level of success. These things, that's what this leadership class, this governance body is doing. In many of these places, they're asking the hard questions. So I think social innovation is, I'm finding it more and more in innovation districts, and I think that is really fascinating. I think it's interesting to see how some places it's just coming up naturally, and other places are really actually trying to push it. And there's really not much more that I can say to that, except that I'm starting to hear more and more about social innovation as part of a broader innovation play. I'm trying to think if there's really anything else. I know from Santiago, I know that the city is crowded and there's not a lot of space. Should we be thinking about something more across the city? Well, that may be a city strategy. It may be that you're looking at a more citywide strategy. Not everything and not every place needs an innovation district. There's no requirement. This is only when local actors come together and say, we are stronger together as a collective, and we're going to use our economic assets, our physical, and figure out how to strengthen the social networking to reach a higher level. No one is being forced into this. It sounds like this, what you're talking about in Chile, might be a city strategy. I don't know enough, but that's, if you're looking at sort of very small spaces, it's maybe something more along those lines. With respect to assessing their districts and their strengths, I think this is a really important piece. This was raised, I think, in Colombia, if I'm understanding it correctly. Now, at Brookings, and I was one of the authors, we just recently released an audit guide. It's a document that allows places to audit themselves, to understand what their strengths are. So we give like, okay, here's the kinds of questions that you want to ask yourself about, do we have a competitive advantage? Do we have the kind of critical mass? Do we have a quality place? Do we have the kind of leadership? So if you go onto the Brookings website and type in Innovation District Audit, you will find this. And it's just a guide to give places a starting point to say, here's how you start to understand your strengths. And frankly, understand your weaknesses. Now, this issue of a risk aversion culture is, it's a big deal. In fact, when I showed the three, the economic, physical, and social, what I had actually said verbally with that is that you do need to have some degree of a risk-taking culture. So I've talked with a lot of places that are wanting to have an innovation district, but they don't have a risk-taking culture at all and are actually quite risk averse. So the question then for them is, well, what is going to motivate you to start thinking differently? Is it a loss of specific talent? Is it going to be, you're going to need to wait till you see that specific corporations or startups are not forming in this area, that you see, like, what is it that's going to motivate? Because this gets at, I mean, no one can force a risk-taking culture. It's something that grows organically with time. Now, Eindhoven, I have to tell you, is the best story I have seen today of moving from risk-averse to risk-taking culture. Now, for them, they needed to feel a loss. They needed Philips to close. They needed to have the kind of destruction that said, we need to do something differently. So I would argue that you don't necessarily need to have this extreme set of loss, but you do need to have a leadership class that says, let's try at least a few things and give it a go. So in St. Louis, not the same story as Eindhoven, they said, let's pool money together and take a chance. Let's pool $20 million and use that money collectively to see if we can create something better than what we have now. But it took a few leaders to say, we can do better than this. I think the whole notion about growing a risk-taking culture is one piece of research that I actually have been wanting to do more on, because I think it so importantly underpins this story and how you move a leadership class and culture along that paradigm. I think from what I can see, and I'm going to end here, from what I can see, it requires local leaderships to at least try a few things. Sometimes it takes one leader to step up and say, I will start. But every story is different, but I have to tell you, this is a very important point that you raised, and I think it requires a lot of internal discussion, frankly. So there's different magnitudes of what kind of risk you can take, and maybe you start small. But if you're going to have a risk-averse culture, it's going to be more difficult. It's going to be considerably difficult to create the kind of innovation ecosystem that we're talking about. So what needs to happen? And that's the conversation that I would have as a group. That's where I would start. So I know I didn't get to everything. Miguel, is there anything that you think I should touch on or you want to add? Maybe you want to add a few things.
I don't think so. I think it's you made a very complex exercise and you integrate most of the things that have been done. So thank you very much, Julie. A clapping for you. Thank you. And thanks, you have overpassed our expectations. We will spend the next days rethinking the critical factors you mentioned, because I think you mentioned most of them. And I think that the right work now to be done for every city is to think on how to adapt this general thinking, these different issues you have put on the table, to adapt it to our own local culture, local social relations, local leadership capacity. Because as you said, the leadership capacity is one of the critical factors anyway. You know. So thank you very much. Hope to meet you soon in Barcelona, but presentially, and we can organize meetings.
Badalona.
And in Badalona, they invited you. You received an invitation to go to Badalona, and thank you very much. So now we will disconnect, and then we will start, if we have time and wish, a local amigos de América Latina. Ahora empezaría un debate local para intentar trasladar a esto a nuestra realidad local, y luego yo os invitaría a compartir algún documento en este sentido, ¿no? En el sentido de decir cómo el debate que ha habido aquí, las aportaciones de Julie, las diferentes intervenciones, nos hacen reflexionar sobre nuestra propia realidad local. Okay, so thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Saludos a todos nuestros amigos de América Latina y seguiremos en contacto.
E parliamo domani.
Ok.
Va benissimo. Ok, ciao ciao.
Bye bye. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Desconectado. Bye bye. Adiós. Hasta pronto. Bueno, això és tot. Són les 9:10.
Your call will be disconnected.
Adiós. Nos vemos. Ara fer un debat, no sé si és el moment, no? Potser podem organitzar un debat entre nosaltres un altre dia, no? En tot cas, ha dit coses molt interessants. Una de les característiques d'aquesta persona, i per això la vam convidar, és que coneix molts casos de tot el món. Ella viatja contínuament i ella coneix molts casos, i per això anava posant exemples, no només americans, perquè ella a més viu a Europa, no? Però això li dona una perspectiva molt real, però de totes formes diu cada realitat local tindrà les seves característiques i per tant no hi ha un model. Una de les coses que ha dit és no hi ha un model. Hi ha uns criteris, hi ha uns factors a tenir en compte, i jo penso que ha tingut la capacitat de contestar-ho quasi tot. Jo anava sentint això, i jo penso que m'ha dit quasi tot. Jo pensava, ostres, això és quasi impossible, no? Per tant, bueno, gràcies per venir. Amb el Ricard pensarem de com donar continuïtat a això. I, bueno, la primera continuïtat és que això es penjarà a YouTube i, per tant, li donarem...
Ja us passarem el vídeo. Hi ha hagut 6 persones connectades tota l'estona fins a 2:45. S'han quedat amb 3.
Bueno, quan el tinguem a YouTube farem nova difusió i hem de pensar... Això és molt important, vull dir que les ciutats es plantegen aquest tipus de coses, és molt important, és el futur de les ciutats, no? I la reflexió de l'àrea metropolitana és un altre nivell, no? Per tant, aquest debat l'hem de seguir, el seguirem, i hi ha una idea que la Julie té la idea amb la gent de la Brooking, bàsicament el Bruce Katz, d'anar creant una xarxa de ciutats, no? Aleshores, la idea és que compti amb Barcelona i a partir de nosaltres, com ella té molt accés a moltes ciutats, no tant a Amèrica Llatina, possiblement per una qüestió de llengua o tal, no? Aleshores, ella confiaria en nosaltres per apalancar-nos a nosaltres des de Barcelona, anar potenciant aquesta xarxa d'Amèrica Llatina, que com veieu ho necessiten, ho necessiten i tenen interès en fer-ho, no? Per tant, ara, no ho sé, jo us convido a que pensem de quina manera continuem aquest debat iniciat. Amb en Ricard us enviarem propostes per veure com li donem. Amb aquest format, és a dir, amb teleconferència, que ha funcionat raonablement bé. Un aplaudiment per a ells, que han estat a la cuina. I amb aquest format, o amb un format més tancat de debat intern nostre, que això també, que tu ja ho fas a nivell de pla estratègic, potser podríem col·laborar Ateneu i Pla Estratègic, pensar com ho fem i alguna vegada, vist que funciona, veure si connectem amb algú que ens sembla important i que ens pot aportar coses a qualsevol lloc del món i il·lustrem aquesta, i ara hi havia 4 ciutats, en la propera que n'hi hagin 8, a l'altra 12 i l'altra ja fotem aquí Barcelona, centre del món. Bé, doncs res més, gràcies i seguirem.